Joseph. By the time they were 14 years of age, the girls, according to custom, were to leave the temple and try to find husbands. All the other girls in the temple were glad to do so, but not Mary. She did not want to get married, as she had offered her services to God. The way this difficulty was resolved was that the priest in charge of the case, who did try to obey God's will, although many of them were motivated otherwise, got in a direction to follow a certain prophecy. According to the prophecy, all unmarried men of the family of David were to bring a rod to the temple. Only one rod would flower, and the spirit in the form of a dove would perch upon it to signify the one to be betrothed to Mary. Joseph was the one. He was much older than Mary. It is said he was 35 or 36 years of age. He was a carpenter and a builder by trade. After Mary left the temple, she returned to her home in Nazareth. There she awaited the one who was to be her guardian, Joseph, the messenger of God. The messenger of God, Archangel Raphael, was responsible for drawing the life streams of Joseph and Mary together to provide the protecting guard for the incoming Messiah. The first time she met Joseph, she saw instead of Joseph, Archangel Zadkiel in blazing light above and behind him. She had not seen the archangels for a number of years. This brought back to her the reality of the angelic host. By the appearance of Archangel Zadkiel, she knew Joseph was the one for her. Joseph belonged to the Essene or the Essene brotherhood. He was a spiritual man and a mystic. The Essene order was a fraternity stemming from the Great White Brotherhood, whose members carried on secret studies in divine alchemy, occultism, and interactions of cosmic law not given in outer world schooling. It was also under the direction of the great divine director. This ascended master and cosmic being was his teacher. After the betrothal, which was equal to a contract of marriage, Joseph returned to his home in the town of Bethlehem to prepare for the final ceremony, the marriage. Mary returned to her parents' home. It was soon after the betrothal that, as promised before her birth, Archangel Gabriel, the bearer of good tidings, appeared to Mary in her room during the time of her daily devotion, in blazing light, with the salutation, "Hail, Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women." He was foretelling Jesus' birth. He brought to her remembrance the divine plan and the purpose of her embodiment, and the feeling to accomplish it in dignity. Had Mary not held the harmony and thus not been in a state of grace when Gabriel came at the ordained moment for the visitation, that moment would have passed, and Gabriel would not have been able to connect his energies with her world. She had learned early in life to maintain harmony, hence Archangel Gabriel's words, "Hail, Mary, full of grace." He could say this with honesty because of Mary's light, strength, grace, and gentleness. Mary's constant state of grace enabled Gabriel to contact her. She had sustained her aura in a state of listening grace, so at the time of his visitation, she was able to receive his presence, hear his words, and get his message, which gave her encouragement to carry out her mission. The state of grace is a state of harmony towards life. Thus one's energy can connect with the energy of any divine being at any time. Since energy and vibration are impersonal, the vibratory action of one's inner bodies either connects with the Ascended Master's realm or with the psychic and astral realm in which human beings are forced to move. The action of these words, spoken by Archangel Gabriel, still forms a cosmic bond between Gabriel, Mary, and those who incorporate these words in their prayers today. Having had association with the angels and archangels, Mary was not frightened, as some claim, or even surprised. As he stood by her side, he told her because she chose and intended to live a chaste life, she had found favour with those in the higher realms. He flashed to her the image, the picture of Jesus' God presence, reviving again this action in her consciousness, which she eagerly grasped. In this flash of illumination, the image of Jesus' presence was impressed and anchored in her consciousness. Also, the remembrance of her vow and Jesus' ministry. This gave her strength to fulfill her mission. Archangel Gabriel gave her the remembrance of the Immaculate Concept at the time of her greatest trials and stood with her through all hours when she needed the assistance of his light in holding her listening grace. He conveyed to Mary that she would be the mother of the expected Messiah who was to be called Jesus. She was to tell no man, not even the priests of the temples. To do so would have aroused much jealousy, criticism, unbelief, and other unpleasant things and forces to handle. Now her mission really began. She and Joseph, who also knew it of course, kept it a secret in their own hearts. They did not let spiritual pride enter, and they told no one. Joseph also held that immaculate concept for Jesus. This divine concept Mary held in spite of the bigotry, hate, and discord driven at her. She held to that concept, and in and around it was drawn the substance of light and physical substance which formed his physical body, and later she held the infant in her arms. In order to create a perfect form, she had to be in a harmonious state at all times. For Mary to hold the Immaculate Concept for Jesus, to take on such a responsibility required years and centuries of preparation, concentration, and consecration. In religions, what is called the Immaculate Conception can easily be, because in conception, to form a new baby body, the one thing required is the presence of the permanent atom of the incoming life stream, when it has been so determined at inner levels for that one to take embodiment. This can just as easily be placed there by that incoming life stream or those at inner levels assisting, as is done ordinarily. Because without this action, the presence of the permanent atom, the tiny threefold flame, no baby body is created. Just the uniting of the male and female seed is not enough. It takes the permanent atom of the incoming life stream to produce conception. Conceptions are predetermined at inner levels. That is, the decision has been made for the life streams involved to embody at that time. Normally, in man's present state of existence, the physical relation of the two seeds coming together is required. Then the third activity takes place, that is, the permanent atom of the incoming life stream is placed there from the inner realms. Not all seed placed in the ground will grow, however. Only seed to which some beings of the elements are sent and assigned produce growth. Formerly, before man drew himself into the present density, the bodies for incoming life streams were produced by means of light rays. The present means of birth was unknown. The bodies were created to full stature, and the incoming life streams would take possession. The individuals retained the memory of the previous lives and went on from there instead of having to learn everything all over again as we do now. On other planets, the former method is still the way of birth. A physical body can only be created by the inner or greater powers. Even though man cannot create a body, yet it is because of the human condition man has drawn himself into that the present means of birth was brought about. Jesus. The great law and the divine beings directing the activities for the incoming Christian dispensation thought it wise that Jesus abide in the Son for a time during this period before taking embodiment. Abide there in proximity to the Father, Helios, the God focus of all light to this planetary system, so as to absorb the consciousness of the all-power of God and get an attunement of his own bodies that he might outpicture and manifest the Father's nature as closely as possible. He spent much time there, studying the presence, the activity, and the nature of Helios and Vesta. He studied how they had utilized the threefold flame within their hearts. When Jesus came into the world of form, he came to represent first and foremost the God who represents the heart of this system. When the time for Jesus' birth came, he, a magnificent Christ, was called for embodiment at the proper time. Lord Maitreya, who was to overshadow him, blessed his son, who bid his teacher adieu. Jesus was surrounded with much love at inner levels as he left those realms of light. He was bound round with the bond of forgetfulness, and the last face he saw as he submitted his consciousness to those forgetting bonds of flesh was that of Lord Maitreya. Thus he passed through the period of forgetfulness, and his consciousness was enveloped in the earth shroud as he came into embodiment, into a physical body, entering the earth plane through the body of Mary. Like everyone else, he came through the body of woman. Then on earth, the first face he gazed upon was that of beloved Mary. Thus, his teacher, Lord Maitreya, was left on the other side of the veil, hoping that Jesus would sometime again remember him and re-establish contact. This contact was necessary for Lord Maitreya to give the instruction to Jesus' outer mind, so he could develop whatever application was required for his ministry and the achievement of his victory. After awakening to the world of form and world of shadows, Jesus too had to rediscover within himself the reason and purpose of being. When Jesus left the inner realms, he had no assurance or guarantee that he would successfully fulfill his mission. He had to make his way through application of the law. John the Baptist. Mary's cousin Elizabeth and her husband Zacharias, were elderly but had no children. Zachary was a priest who served in the temple at Jerusalem. They lived in the hills of Hebron in Judea. They were good and righteous people according to their understanding, and had prayed much for a child. Zachary had gone to Jerusalem in the autumn, apparently for the annual feast days. Like other priests, he stayed in the temple during that time in quarters provided for that purpose. Archangel Gabriel came to Zachary as he was officiating in the temple and told him that his petition had been heard and that his wife would bear him a son. Here again is an example of how the law requires the call to be made. He was told they were to name the son John, that he shall not drink wine or strong drink, that he would be great, and his mission was to prepare the way for the expected Messiah. Because Zachary could not fully believe it, Gabriel told him he would be dumb and unable to speak until these things came to pass. Then the archangel also appeared to Elizabeth at home and told her likewise. When Zachary had completed his service at the temple, he went home, and they rejoiced. In due time, the son was born, and they named him John. Then Zachary regained his speech. John grew up in the desert and later became known as John the Baptist. He was about 6 months older than Jesus. Mary spent some time during her pregnancy with her cousin Elizabeth, who was over 100 miles away. A solitary journey it must have been. Solitary in consciousness even if she travelled with others. The other time she spent with Joseph in Nazareth. Joseph understood much of the cosmic law, the law of life, and imparted a great deal to her. They enjoyed their association with each other and made plans for their future life. Through those months, Mary made small garments and they made preparations for the coming of Jesus. Joseph was of much assistance to her with his love, kindness, and patience. He gave her protection, comfort, and inspiration in her service. For all this, Mary has said she is eternally grateful. It was required of Mary to hold the perfect image of Jesus, the Immaculate Concept, all during his life until his ultimate victory. With the training Mary had, there was much she could have done in healing and giving assistance in her own village before the birth of Jesus. There was much illness, confusion, and distress among the people in the land. She had to choose between holding the Immaculate Concept and preparing the most perfect radiation for the incoming child, or spreading herself too thin in an endeavour to serve her fellow men. It took sacrifice, discrimination, and wisdom, but with help from Joseph, Archangel Gabriel, and Lord Maitreya, she fulfilled her mission and purpose in life. Birth of Jesus. At that time, Augustus Caesar, Octavius, commanded a census be taken of all people. It was required that everyone go to the city or town of his own family to register for the tax imposed by the Romans. Joseph, being of the house and lineage of David, had to go from Nazareth in Galilee to Bethlehem in Judea, about 6 miles or so from Jerusalem. Mary went with him, riding a donkey. It was a journey of 3 or 4 days. Instead of staying home in comparative comfort, she went because the time was near for the birth of her child, and prophecy had it that the Messiah was to be born in Bethlehem. It was evening when they arrived, and there was no room for them at the inn, which most likely was not an inn as we know it, but a hospitable house for travellers. Just for an instant, she was concerned and wondered why the great law had not made provisions for a room, knowing she was meant to be there. But she instantly checked herself, reminding herself that she must remain harmonious. Joseph went and found a place in a stable a cave in the hillside. At that time, living quarters and stables were often situated in caves in connection with each other. Had Mary been unwilling and preferred to stay home, the setting would not have been such that Jesus' mission could have begun. However, she willingly went through those hardships to fulfill the prophecy because it had been prophesied that Christ child would be born in Bethlehem. Hence, she went with Joseph. It was near sunset when they went into the cave. It is said that Joseph went to find a midwife. He got an elderly Hebrew woman who was from Jerusalem. They got to the cave after sunset, and as they entered, they saw the place was filled with light. It got so intense they could not see. It was brighter than the sun. Jesus was born at about midnight. All during delivery, this place was filled with blazing light. Then it decreased, and they could see Mary with the infant in her arms, nursing it. The midwife was very grateful for being privileged to be a witness. She gave praise and thanks and was healed of a long-standing affliction by touching the infant. This shows how the Christ action for which Jesus was a focus began even then, and that it acted before there was conscious action through the physical body. It can and does act at times without the person's outer direction or having understanding or even knowledge of it. At the time of the birth of Jesus, an angel appeared to the shepherds attending their flocks in the fields in that locality. The angel told them that in Bethlehem, the town of David, had been born a Saviour who was Christ, and they would find the infant lying in a manger. Then there appeared with the angel a host of beings singing their praises. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among men of good will. This choir, the shepherds heard singing glad hosannas of peace on earth, goodwill towards men, was really the celebrating of the festival of the Christ's victory, which had been celebrated for many ages in the higher realms by those who had attained their freedom through individual effort. It was the radiation of their rejoicing which was communicated to the shepherds by the angelic choir. So the chorus the shepherds heard was not really because of Jesus' birth, but conception had been so timed that his birth would coincide with this annual rejoicing at inner levels. As one realizes more and more the spiritual significance of Christmas, the experience in his consciousness of his own oneness with God the Father will be made manifest. Father means one's creator. When the angels had gone, the shepherds went to Bethlehem to see. They found Mary and Joseph and the babe in the manger. The cave seemed like a temple to them because of the outpouring of the radiation from the presence of divine beings. After they had seen the child, they understood what the angel had told them concerning him. All this was a manifestation of God. A star appeared and was seen above the stable, not only by the shepherds, but by others at the inn. They saw its bright light and felt the vibrations, which generated a feeling of awe in them. This star was from Jesus' own divine self, that is, a radiance, a manifestation from his Christ self. It is the same star the wise men saw in their home countries, and which the three successfully followed to the Christ child. Mary and Joseph knew their mission and prayed that they have strength to fulfill it. When they first saw their innocent and vulnerable divine child, they knelt in prayer that they might stand the guard for him until that little body was strong and could walk, and until the divine memory of his mission would be anchored within him. They examined the little body from head to toe and found it perfect as they had hoped. They prayed for it to remain so, and that his mental body might be kept free from all imperfect concepts of the outer world, and his feelings protected against all discord. Joseph thought they were over the worst part, and they planned to settle down while Jesus grew up. At Bethlehem, that first night of Jesus' arrival, as Mary curled some of his fine golden hair loosely around her finger, she was aware that his eyes could not yet focus on the things of this world, but did mirror the kingdom from whence he had come. Mary was clairvoyant and could see somewhat beyond ordinary sight. Mary's constancy in her vigilance in holding the divine pattern of Jesus provided for him a physical body with its attendant inner bodies that outpictured the perfection of the God presence of his life stream. He was named Jesus as Archangel Gabriel had said to do. According to Jewish custom, after giving birth to a son, the mother had to stay in seclusion for 40 days and was not permitted in the temple or to partake of any of the activities. 40 days after birth, they took him to the temple in Jerusalem for the customary rituals to be performed according to the law of Moses, and he was consecrated. While they were there, a priest called Simeon of Jerusalem also came to the temple. He had been directed to the place by divine guidance in order to see the Messiah, and it had been revealed to him that he would. When Mary came in, very happy, holding Jesus in her arms, Simeon saw them in a pillar of light, with angels standing guard around them. This pleased him greatly, as it was the fulfillment of his quest. He recognized the baby Jesus as the Christ child, the one he was looking for, and he called forth God's blessings upon them. He then was ready to depart from this world in peace. An elderly prophetess named Anna at the temple also recognized who the child really was. It has not been made too clear, but they must have returned to Bethlehem. Various writers have it that the 3 wise men followed the star from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and Mary did say they had gotten settled after Jesus was born, expecting to raise the child there.